God's kind of love does not joy on the unrighteousness. It does not get joyful. It is not rejoicing based on injustice. It does not rejoice over unjustness. Something that would be bad or wrong. We saw that previously in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 9. But, Paul continues, godly love joys together with the truth. That would be a reference again to chapter 12 and verse 26. Here he writes that God's kind of love joys together with the truth. It continues to be rejoicing in conjunction with that which is true, God's truth. Godly love protectively covers all things. We saw that word previously in chapter 9 and verse 12. So godly love continues to shelter. It protectively covers, shelters. It keeps or fends off anything that would be harmful. It sustains and supports all of God's spiritual things, God's spiritual matters. It's likened to the roof of a house, which protects all of what is under the house or inside the house. God's kind of love protectively covers all of God's spiritual things. God's kind of love believes all things. It continues to trust, to have faith in all of God's spiritual things. This phrase does not refer to believing everything and anything that you may hear someone else communicate to you. That is not what this is referring to. The context, as we know, is God's spiritual things. Here it is, God's love believes all of God's spiritual things. Godly love hopes all things. It continues to expect all of God's spiritual things to come to pass at a future time, to come into being, to happen in the future. Godly love patiently endures all things. It continues to hold up, to bear up, staying and remaining upright relative to God and the things of God, all of God's spiritual things. And let's read a summary so that we can understand whether we are walking or behaving in God's kind of love. Are we being loving towards other people? This is a checkpoint, as it were. Are you behaving in a loving fashion from God's point of view, with God's kind of love? God's kind of love is patient. Are we being patient? It is benevolent. Are we being benevolent or kind towards one another? God's kind of love is not jealous. Are we being jealous towards each other? Then if we are not behaving with God's kind of love. God's kind of love does not vaunt itself. It does not puff itself up. It is not indecorous. It does not seek after the thing of itself. It is not self-centered. Are we behaving in a self-centered fashion? If we are, then we are not walking in God's love. God's love is not sharpened. It does not calculate what? The bad thing. Are you reckoning something in your mind that may be against God's will? Then that is not walking in God's kind of love, that agape love. God's love does not joy on unrighteousness, injustice, but it joys together with the truth. We are to joy or rejoice in conjunction with God's truth. No matter who is manifesting something that they have received from God. Maybe it's a particular function in the one body of Christ. Maybe someone received a contribution from the Spirit within them, and they are manifesting it forth so that you would see them manifest. We should not be jealous towards one another, but we should be joined together with each other, manifesting God's kind of love in our behavior, rejoicing with God's truth. God's love protectively covers all of God's spiritual things. It believes all of God's spiritual things. It hopes, expects to come to pass at a future time all of God's spiritual things. It patiently endures all of God's spiritual things. This is our checkpoint as to, are we behaving? Are we walking? Are we conducting our lives according to God's kind of love, agape love?